Wokingham Today is hosting a series of interviews ahead of the local elections. Joining us today is Councillor Lindsay Ferris, leader of the Wokingham Liberal Democrat group. Lindsay, my first question to you is, what motivates you as a local politician?
Motivated me to get involved in local politics was to replace what I had. I had a really good education when I grew up, and I wanted to provide help for other people to be able to do the same. And that was my original involvement. I became a governor of a local school for a number of years. And once you get involved in local issues, you find that there's so much more to do. And that is where I came from to get involved. I just wanted to put in and replace the activities that I had when I was younger.
Thanks, Lindsay. What do you think sets your group apart from the others?
I think there's a really strong commitment on a number of very important areas that drive us into where we go. We feel it is absolutely important to treat everybody equally. Doesn't matter what their sexual orientation is, where they are, what they do, what colour they are. We think everybody should be treated the same. And at the moment, we do not think that is the case. We also feel that the way the council has been run, we don't think the finances of the council have been looked after properly. We're very concerned about the borrowing the council is going to be taking. We've got figures of 750 million for March 2024, the borrowing of the council. And I think that just shows a sort of lack of control. And we need to put greater focus on providing the services, but value for money for the residents, and focus on the services for the residents rather than just whacking up great big borrowing levels. And I think that those are sort of issues that drive us. So we have got the background of where we are within the Lib Democrats, our beliefs, and also our desire to move forward.
Thank you. If you had to characterize the Liberal Democrat candidates with one word, what would it be?
Determined.
And why is that?
Because you have to work so much harder as a Liberal Democrat to get elected. So you have to work 10 times harder. And we have a commitment for our local community. We work very hard on local issues. We're prepared to get involved with those smaller issues that some people don't think so much about, because it's those issues that residents worry about, particularly on an individual or group basis. And that is what drives us.
Thank you. If you had to characterize the Liberal Democrat candidates with one word, what would it be?
Determined.
And why is that?
Because you have to work so much harder as a Liberal Democrat to get elected. So you have to work 10 times harder. And we have a commitment for our local community. We work very hard on local issues. We're prepared to get involved with those smaller issues that some people don't think so much about, because it's those issues that residents worry about, particularly on an individual or group basis. And that is what drives us.
Thanks,
I would put determination.
First area that I'd like to talk about is the environment and climate emergency. What would your party do within the next year to move forwards on that net zero carbon emission goal for 2030?
Well, can I start with where we are at the moment? Because where our group is very concerned is that if you look at what the current Conservative administration has done, they have moved projects from what were environmental projects or just sort of normal type of activities that the council's done, and moved them into the climate change activity, and giving the impression that the council is doing a lot on climate change. But our concern about that is that if the message given from the council is that, oh, we're doing really good job, then the public will think that we are. And if in 5 years' time, it turns out that we haven't done what we really need to do, we will have even harder job to move forward. So I think that's where I want to start from. And the greatest areas that we need is not just carbon neutrality, which is where a lot of things are saying that we can plant the trees, the 300,000 trees that we're proposing to plant across the borough. That will help. We will support building of new properties with solar panels. We will support the installation of electric car points. All of those on an individual basis will help. But we also need to move on what I call carbon negative. We have to find ways of taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, not just not to do so much, because I think we are at that tipping point where if we're not moving forward, and those are the areas that I've asked my team to go into, and they would have the details of the individual projects of where we're looking at, and we've written a number of papers on that area. And I think that's where we would focus. It isn't just on carbon neutral, all the ones that you hear, but we do need to get into finding ways of actually taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And that is one of the areas that we would look into.
I understand that your group has predicted that the current plan would only reduce the amount of carbon by 50%. Why declare a goal if it can't be achieved?
You can have a target. There's nothing, I've never said that it's any problem with somebody having a target for moving something, because then you can do something about it. The way the services at the moment with the climate change, they're just not going to meet. For example, when we were talking about the solar farm, we said it only would impact about 1% or less than 1% on the overall impact of the level of carbon dioxide in the borough. And we need to do much better. So you have to strive further to be able to get at particular points, because if you don't try to go further, you won't ever get there. And I don't think people realize how close we are to that tipping point, and we really do need to have that urgency.
Thank you, Lindsay. Talking now more about things happening on the ground, there's been a lot of public disturbance about the change from black boxes to recycling bags. Now, this was a decision made without consultation to hopefully reduce the waste, the waste of the paper, and improve the recycling rates. So do you think more decisions should be made without consultation? Where do you stand on this?
No, I think consultation is one of the most important things. If you try and impose something on residents, you are going to get a lot of resistance. And the green bags are the classic way of what not to do at the council. Not only did they not consult at all, they didn't even have a business case put together to work out how much these bags would cost and what the replacement proposals were. And we called that particular project in. Calling in is one of the few things an opposition group can do, and that is where you indicate we don't think the council has gone through the correct process, not whether the decision's right or wrong, but whether they've gone through the right process. And there was absolutely no indication of how much these bags were going to cost, how they were going to get them out, when they were going to come. And that is just not a way to run a council. And that goes back to the point that I made earlier on about the borrowing going up to £750 million. A lot of the projects the council have do not seem to be controlled. There doesn't seem to be a person in charge of that particular area to say that this is okay. What happens at Wokingham Borough is that they have an inbuilt 10% above the cost of the business case if they put one together, but let's say something is going to cost £1 million. They just automatically go to £1.1 million and say, oh, we're in budget. That's not how I was when I was at work. I had a business case for £1 million. If I had to go over £1 million, I had to explain what on earth went on. None of that seems to be happening in Wokingham, and it's just a waste of the cost that the council has. So the green bags are just an example of how poorly managed and run the council is in certain areas.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'd like to talk now about housing and also planning. I understand generally that residents are concerned about a lack of infrastructure with the volume of building projects that happen in our borough. How could your party improve this?
Well, we've taken the stance now for the last 2 years that any major development, the infrastructure needs to be there first, particularly the roads that are going to be put in. And we saw the disaster of how things was done in 2017, 18 and 19, where all the long queues and the mess and everything that was made, there was no forethought as to how the work was to be done. If we've got more big projects coming, and with the local planning, we do unfortunately have to take a number of houses in the borough or homes in the borough, it needs to be planned to say this is what you would do. You put the roads in place that you need to make sure that those houses can be built, and then you can build the houses in those places, because then you've got the ability of going from A to B. If you just build the houses and you then find that they come into another road and it goes down another road, you just suddenly find you've got a whacking great big queue at some point along the road. And you go, oh, it's got to be done properly. And I feel that the way the council has gone about it has not been the right way. I will say I think they're starting to have some movement on that they are going to be starting to look at providing that infrastructure. And that will mean that you have to start off with some seed money to make sure you can do some building before you get any of the either Section 106 or what's known as the Community Infrastructure Levy, SIL money in to pay for it. But what is extremely worrying is the government's consultations that have been taking place during the pandemic all the way through 2020, mostly linked with planning. The latest proposals are talking about reducing the amount of money being provided by developers for infrastructure, and they're also talking about less involvement of local people. And we think both of those are in the wrong direction, and as a group we have provided that information and comment back into the government to say we do not think this is appropriate. So we are in a situation that if the government carries on with proposals that they're doing, it will be harder to put infrastructure in place. And we just don't see the rationale for that, because if you don't have the infrastructure in place as you're building it, then it will be chaos like we had in 17, 18 and 19. And I'm sure a lot of residents in the borough remember the queues going up Finchampstead Road or trying to get through the centre of Wokingham and other parts of the borough over a 3 or 4 year period.
Thank you, Lindsay. Slightly separately, but still related to housing, many of the under 30s are being increasingly priced out of Wokingham when it comes to both buying and renting. What more can the Lib Dems do to make homes for these people?
Our manifesto for 2019 was called Homes for Local People. And we think that instead of the developers just building 3, 4 and 5 bedroom properties, we need the properties that local people need. And we've said that we need to make sure that we get affordable 1, 2 and 3 bedroom properties. There's so many of them in their 30s and 40s who cannot afford to get onto the housing market. We need to be able to provide the social housing and the affordable housing for local people. And I think it's important to focus on local people, because if we just have the houses built and it's 4 and 5 bedroom properties, we find that we get people move into the borough from other parts of the country, and I admit 30 years ago I did, that means that we get extra people come into the borough, but we still haven't managed to provide homes for those local people who can't afford to get onto the ladder. So that's why we're focusing on the starter end of the market to enable people to get onto the housing ladder, and that is our focus. And we will turn to the developers and say, we'll put the proposals together to say, this is what we as a Liberal Democrat council would want for your houses. And we'll turn around to the developers and say, we need you to do that. What's been happening over the last 4, 5, 6 years is that a developer comes along and says, oh, I don't want to put 35% of my property as social or affordable housing. Can I give you some money, and I can build 80% or 90% of them as 4 and 5 bedroom properties, and here's some money. Well, that doesn't get the houses built, because what then happens is that Wokingham might get some money in, but they then got to find the land to build those other houses. And it's better, I feel, for the developers to do the cross section, but not all developers are like that. Some are better than others, but we want to influence the developers to be much more socially minded, be wary, and take account of what local people need. Another area
about developers, Lindsay.
Yeah.
There were no affordable homes built in the Carnival Pool development, and that was built by our council. What message do you think that sends to developers?
The opposite of what I've just said. You could do what you like. In fact, it's not just the Carnival Pool area. There was the Peach Place development. They used the commuted sums to pay for the properties that were built there, and then made them for sale. It gives the wrong message, and it also said that gave an indication that maybe that particular project was marginal because they needed to have the money from the sale of the property. So it gives a completely wrong message to developers. It means that you can do what you like. I thought it was an absolute disgrace, and my colleagues who were on the council at the time that the whole planning process went through on that, I've shouted that loud and clear for many years. It was an absolute disgrace.
I'd like to talk now about regeneration and business as well. Outside of Wokingham Town Centre, which we've already mentioned, what is your vision for the other town and village centres, Twyford, Woodley, places like this, when it comes to improving them for residents?
Yes, when the Wokingham project was started, I remember a previous leader of the council saying, some of the money that we generate will be used in other parts of the borough. Well, we're into 2021, and the particular project in Wokingham is now only just about paying off its interest, not provided anything back towards for the council. So we would have to find the appropriate resources and finance to do work on the Woodley Town Centre, and to a lesser extent on the Twyford area. We've had a relatively new Waitrose in Twyford, so there isn't so much work to be done in Twyford, but I think the Woodley Town Centre is now starting to get to the point where it really does need to have quite a bit of serious work done on it, and the resources will have to be found to do that. But it would be a significant priority for the Liberal Democrat group to do something to improve that area. Thank
you. Talking about business owners, there are a lot of people in the borough that own a small business, have started a business and it's grown. How is your party supporting, business owners, entrepreneurs in the borough in light of the pandemic?
Well, during the pandemic, one of the things I think the council has done very well was the fact that the government gave grants to the council. Initially, they gave it on specific areas. And as local councillors, we were fed back into the finance department that there needed to be greater flexibility. Both my colleague and myself here in Twyford were getting people saying, I don't qualify and I'm really struggling. So what happened towards the end of the finances is that there were a lot more discretionary grants. And I am pleased to say that a number of businesses did receive at least some financial assistance during this pandemic. So I think that is where we can start. What we are proposing is that we want to have a COVID recovery plan. We think it is absolutely essential that we get the businesses in all the various parts of the borough up and running again and give them whatever support we can, whether it's advertising, letting people know that they're open, giving them the support in certain areas. That is one of the main focuses that we would do from day one, should we get into some form of control of the council. It is absolutely essential.
Thank you, Lindsay. I'd like to talk now about children, about young people, about our health and our well-being, which is equally as important and really has been made quite significant over the past year. Now, in the past year, we've also had a rise in knife crime, and I wondered, do you think there is a link between antisocial behaviour and a lack of youth services and clubs and provision for younger people?
Yes, I do. I was a trustee at the Twyford Youth Centre for a number of years after the council decided to effectively no longer support a number of youth centres. And I'm pleased to say that the youth centre is still going, and it is vital. Idle hands make light work is one of the sayings. So I might get my sayings wrong, but I think there's something like that. If people haven't got, and particularly young people, haven't got somewhere or someone to guide them, they soon go astray. We've had some problems, not just with knife crime. There's antisocial behaviour. We had the garden, not the garden, the play equipment in Latimer Road area set on fire only a week or so ago, and that is extremely concerning. What the council has been doing, and on that I am a member of what's called the Community Safety Partnership, which is the linking between Wokingham Borough Council, the police and other bodies that link in to it, is to provide the appropriate support. And what was so disappointing is that back in 2019, I discovered that the officers in the council who were responsible for both antisocial behaviour and domestic abuse, one had retired and one had left, and the council wasn't replacing them. And at one of the first meetings I had with Susan Parsonage, our new chief exec, or was new then, was to raise that point with her to say that we need to put that community link back in. And I'm pleased to say now, 2 years later, we've got it. But we've had hiatus now for 18 months where there wasn't the link. And I think there is an absolute direct link between not providing the necessary support and facilities for young people and the fact that we're now getting additional and unfortunate antisocial behaviour, as I will call it, in the widest sense.
What more could the Lib Dems be doing for young people?
That is a really we have got to provide additional resource for the youth centres that we do still have. We need to make sure that all of the services that I mentioned are working in a better way, so that where we have problems, we've got someone to go along and help the families or the individuals, because often it's because of something. That is the area that I would originally focus on, because that is the sort of area that the council has the ability to do things. But from an overall perspective, I think we're looking at better education, making sure all the schools are fitting. It's an enormous answer to do that. and it covers an absolute wide range of issues. And I think that's where we would start to look at where there can be improvements and where we can to look at.
Thank you, Lindsay. And talking now about well-being for everybody of all ages, what is the Lib Dem group doing to support everybody here and our mental health and our well-being?
Well, on the mental health, we have a specific policy that we've had now for 2 years, and this one does deal with the children and adolescents or young people. There is a service called the Children and Adolescents Mental Health Service, and the council unfortunately has not funded it properly. There's a waiting list of around about 2 years. Our proposals are that we would find enough money to fund 3 staff to reduce that waiting list from 2 years down to our target of 6 weeks. And we think it is so vital because people are waiting so long to get an assessment. Not only does it have the impact on the child or the children involved, it has an impact on the family because of that, the whole thing. So that is one area. For adults on mental health, that is where the council needs to link in better through the health and wellbeing body into the NHS to make sure that we are getting a proper service for mental health. It has received some more money in the last year or two, but there's still a long way to go because the legacy, I think one of the real problems that will come out of the lockdown is the impact of the lockdown on people. I know we all can feel how people have been, how grumpy you feel sometimes, how you're just looking to do things, and it's having an impact on a whole range of people, and it's right the way across, and there has to be a major focus on it. So we would link into the link through the health and wellbeing board, linking into the NHS to make sure that additional services are done, and we would see what as a council we can do to augment.
Thank you. I'd like to ask one sort of final question about health, which is on air pollution. Actually, in parts of the borough, it's up to concerning levels, and we've just had a year of dealing with a virus that affects our lungs. What more can we do to protect our lungs specifically?
Well, I think one of the things that we've got to do is to actually try and discourage too much traffic, because most of the places, and then one of the 2 places that we've got the highest level for is at the crossroads here in Twyford, where I am member of. And we need to find alternatives to just using our car. There will be people moving towards electric vehicles, but we need, and we're pushing very strongly on making sure that when the new road infrastructure is put in place, that we have got the facilities that you have a pavement and a cycle path separate from the road, so that it becomes truly safe. If people go to Holland, they'll find that people are riding their bikes, they're separate. We need to encourage as much as we can off the car. The problem we have with public transport is it's going to be a little while before people will be willing in large numbers to go back on the trains or in the buses. So for a period, we have got to think about other ways, and we just need to be able to discourage that. We're also proposing what I call non-idle zones, where you if you stop at the trail lights, you turn your engine off. And there's also the speed of traffic around schools and such like, and those will help, but they're only little bits at each time. We've got to make a real major move, and the major move will be moving away from the petrol and diesel engine, and secondly reducing the number of journeys that we do in a vehicle. If we don't need to use the car, then let's find another alternative. And I think that's what we really do need to do, and that becomes all part of the climate emergency, because it's the pollution aspect, because it isn't just the level of carbon dioxide, the level of nitrogen dioxide, nitric oxide, but it's the particulates that's in the that come out of the exhaust of the car that generate the greatest problem. And it's the size of the particulates which cause a problem, because it gets into the lungs, and it can be quite serious. Or in one particular case recently, the youngster was found to have been killed by the pollution in the area, and that was the case in London that I think most of us can remember.
Thank you, Lindsay. Talking about road safety, highways, and actually you mentioned the speed of traffic being one thing in there. Wokingham Today specifically has reported on safety concerns on the A327 Reading Road in Finch-Hampstead. We've reported it 5 times in 10 months, but actually the issue has been ongoing since March 2019. That's over 2 years ago. Is 2 years an appropriate wait time for safety concerns?
I'm wondering whether it goes back before 2019, because the A327 has had lots of problems for a long time. It's not a road that I use frequently personally, but I have seen the queues, I've seen the problems and all of the issues. And one of the proposals was linked in with the South Wokingham Distributor Road and getting an alternative on that. But to have 2 years where something has been raised as a safety issue and it has not been dealt with, well, I think it says it for itself.
We've had now a year of staying at home and COVID restrictions are easing, congestion is returning. Residents do want to see their journey times reduced. What can be done about this?
It's interesting because I think the busy hour has changed. There has been quite a considerable increase in traffic in just this last week, since it's the 12th of April. But the queue isn't at 7:30, 8 o'clock or 8:30 in the morning. It's about 11 o'clock. And I think it's because of the changed working habits. So we're getting a different busy hour. And we need to assess what the impact of that is going to do, because I believe that so many people who have been at home are going to be continuing to work at home. They may go into their office, but they may only go into their office 1 or 2 days a week. And if that happens, then we will, as a result, have less traffic in total on the roads. Not everybody will be able to do that, and some people will need to go back to work full time. So we've got to work through and understand what the traffic levels are going to be once we've moved out of the full lockdown. We're still coming out of lockdown. What the new normal is going to be is what people call it. And I don't know at this stage exactly what the new normal is going to be, but I believe that a significant percentage of people who have been working at home for a year will still work at home for at least part of the week. And anything that stops unnecessary travel and therefore pollution must be a good thing. So in turn, it might be a sort of a consequence of something that's come unpleasant that's come to us, that we might have moved the working at home, because there has been some movement on that, then do. And what I think it will also have is, I've been thinking it through on this, is that you've got a company that says has 300 people working for them, and they've got 3 sites of 100 each. They might only need to keep one of those 3 sites. And when people go in and they're not going in every day, you get job sharing and such like. That reduces the traffic levels. So there is that consequence, and we need to understand what that's going to do.
Okay, thank you. The last topic on highways is actually about the Greenways scheme. Thousands has been invested into it. Is it fair to pump the money into what is essentially a leisure activity instead of something that can help people on the roads?
My leads have been working on that in more detail than myself. I don't think the councillors necessarily use the funds they've got as well as they should, but I think having the ability to elect people to be able to move about in a safer environment has some sort of credit to it. So I think it's a mixture of how well have they done it, but it isn't all a bad thing, because if at the end of the day we've got some good routes that enable people to get about across the borough, then we'd be happy on that. But there are particular aspects to it.
Now, I'd like to invite you to make some closing remarks directly to the voters of Wokingham.
It's time for a better future in Wokingham. The council needs a fresh start. The Liberal Democrats are willing, and I believe able, to provide this fresh start. We will change the culture at Wokingham Borough Council. We will put climate change and equality at the forefront of everything we do. Liberal Democrats will bring council's finances under control. With borrowing hurtling towards £750 million by March 2024, our finances under the Conservatives are out of control. Liberal Democrats will listen to residents. The Conservatives say they do, but we have found they have not. We will plant 300,000 trees and renew hedgerows, improving the biodiversity over the next 10 to 20 years. We'll produce a COVID-19 recovery plan to help businesses and the local economy. The mental health of our children and young people has been severely impacted, and we will reduce the rating time for the mental health assessments for children, which currently are taking 2 years, to be reduced to 6 weeks. Conservatives have neglected our roads repairs for many years. We would make sure that's better. And a vote for the Liberal Democrats on the 6th of May is a vote for much needed change in our borough. Please support your local Democrat candidates across the borough.